Hello, everyone. I wanted to do just a very brief video about some of the writers that we are going to be reading this week who deal with the topics of realism and naturalism, in particular naturalism. We are reading this week Stephen Crane, Jack London, and Upton Sinclair. All three of them are known as practitioners of what we refer to as naturalism. Now, previously in the 19th century, there had been the concept of romanticism that was frequently a part of literature. You may be familiar with the romantic poets like Wordsworth and Byron and Shelley and Keats and Coleridge, all of those famous poets from England who dealt with Romanticism, which was really focused on the individual, the capability of the individual against great forces or in the midst of great forces like nature, the universe, and our place in it. Now, realism and naturalism are going to be kind of a reaction to romanticism. Realism is focused basically on everyday life. Instead of looking at an individual in extraordinary circumstances like romanticism did, realism is going to focus on people in their day-to-day lives. We've just read some examples of realism. Edith Wharton would be seen as an example of realism, although she did focus a lot more on wealthier people. But that was one of the criticisms of realism is it primarily did focus on the middle class, or in some cases, like with Wharton, the upper class. Yes, it was everyday day life. Yes, it was more realistic, but it was of people of a certain socioeconomic status. Naturalism, which is what we kind of read or we're reading this week with Crane, London, and Sinclair, those three writers focus not necessarily on the middle classes, but on people who are in more dire circumstances, people who are maybe on the fringes a little bit. Part of the development of naturalism was a part kind of a bit of a reaction to the social Darwinism that was becoming more and more prominent in late 19th, early 20th century America. But in the works of naturalists, we basically see that sometimes our circumstances are too much for us individuals to bear. And so we see often the consequences that might occur, not necessarily through any failure of the individual, but just the fact that those individuals are placed in circumstances beyond their control. And so we see this in some of our works that we read for this, that we're reading this week, with The Open Boat by Stephen Crane. You see here an attitude towards God that is not going to be something that will be seen in earlier literature that much in America. Um, if you look on page 1034 from our textbook of The Open Note, the individuals in the story as they realize that they are going to drown, probably. And right after they thought they were going to get rescued, on page 1034, we have the exclamation, if I am going to be drowned, if I am going to be drowned, if I am going to be drowned. Why in the name of the seven mad gods who rule the sea was I allowed to come thus far and contemplate sand and trees? So the individual is upset that they thought they were going to get rescued. They thought they were going to have an opportunity to get to shore, and then the sea sweeps them back out. And they're asking, why did this occur? We see something similar again a few pages later on page 1039. We see a repeat of that question. If I am going to be drowned, if I am going to be drowned, if I am going to be drowned, why in the name of the seven mad gods who rule the sea was I allowed to come thus far and contemplate sand and trees? And in the response to that is that eventually the individual realizes that there either are no gods or the gods don't care. It says that a man would conclude that it was really the intention of the seven mad gods to drown him, despite the abominable injustice of it. And then a few lines down from there, it says, when it occurs to a man that nature does not regard him as important, and that she feels she would not maim the universe by disposing of him, he at first wishes to throw bricks at the temple, and he hates deeply the fact that there are no bricks and no temples. So it's kind of an idea of helplessness, that there is nothing that is punishing you, but there's nothing that's going to save you either. You're seen as unimportant in naturalism, potentially, by the larger forces shaping the universe, that they are so much bigger than us that we really can't contemplate them being either our saviors or our destroyers. They're just there. We see this as well in To Build a Fire. You see the individual who he is going to freeze to death, not because he did anything immoral or because he did anything extremely foolish. Now, it was probably not the wisest decision, but he is going to freeze to death just by the reality of it being 75 degrees below zero. So that's not something that the individual can overcome, like they might be able to in many romantic texts. In the naturalist text, somebody is going to be in the Yukon, they're going there to have a better life, and ultimately they succumb to the elements. And then finally, the last writing that we'll be reading from Volume C of the textbook, Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. We again see another individual on the fringes of society controlled by forces larger than him. In this case, social orders that are larger than him. We have an immigrant working in the meatpacking industry. Sinclair wrote and created his protagonist to demonstrate the reform that was needed in that industry. And that's kind of what Sinclair was as a writer. He was a muckraker. Muckraker sounds like it's negative, but it was actually a pretty admirable way of being a journalist. It's basically you went into certain circumstances and observed things, and then typically wrote long form journalism, which is what The Jungle, which we read an excerpt from, is basically detailing, how bad certain industries were. And that's something that Sinclair did quite frequently, exposed industries as he was going to rally for reform within them. So that's something to think about as you read Upton Sinclair's excerpts from The Jungle. We are looking at, it is a very political text. It is a text that was meant to expose the meatpacking industry there in Chicago and a lot of the bad and corrupt practices that surrounded it. And so that was one of the goals of naturalism, was to basically show us the world as it is, and show us as it is for not just people with great means, great educations, and things like that, but let's look at the life of the average American. And even beyond that, with naturalism, people who were often on the fringes of society, their stories are portrayed in naturalism. So that's all I have for this today. I will hopefully make one more video before fall break over some of the poets that we will be reading this week as well. E.A. Robinson, Robert Frost, and T.S. Eliot. So I will do one more video and then we will have fall break. Thank you.